Hello and welcome to ATARC's webinar series. Today, topic experts will share strategies that agencies can implement to alleviate the concern of the unknown and make operations more efficient. My name is Kirsten, and I'm going to be the moderator for the panel discussion today. ATARC stands for the Advanced Technology Academic Research Center, and ATARC is an organization that facilitates collaboration between government, industry, and academia in order to accelerate technology modernization initiatives. ATARC provides ongoing opportunities for cross-agency collaboration through on-site interaction, learning, and market research. I would like to welcome all of our attendees today, and a special thanks to Abby Dale, Saskia Sawyer, and the entire WalkMe team for making today's event possible. Before we begin, I want to encourage our audience to interact and engage with us. You can submit questions of your own or comments in the Q&A section of this platform, and also be sure to respond to any of the poll questions that come up throughout. There will be 3 throughout the conversation and then 1 at the very end. And responding to this ensures that you receive your CPE credit for attending today's event. So with all of that said, I would love to welcome our panelists to go ahead and come on camera and come off mute because we're going to do a quick round of introductions. I'd like to hear from each of you who you are, what your role is, what you do for work, and what agency or organization you're with. If we could begin with Mason first, please.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Mason McDaniel, and I think I am very vaguely listed in the introduction materials as, I think, federal IT expert. That was because I'm sort of in a state of transition at the moment. Full disclosure, I took the fork, and I spent 10 years as ATF CTO, most recently up until March, mid-March, and I'm in the process of settling on what my next steps are going to be. But so I'm speaking in my personal capacity today. Most of the examples and context I want to be given are largely from my ATF experience, although did similar types of IT modernization work for Customs and Border Protection before that, and a number of years at FBI. So I may draw on some of those examples as well.
Amazing. Happy to have you here. And we'll go to Daniel next.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Daniel Buchholz. I'm the Red Cell unit chief here at the U.S. Department of State. So I run the penetration testing team that does all the FISMA high systems across the department, as well as I actually run a red team. So one of the things I can see is I get to work with all the new technology that's coming out and make sure that it's secure and that that our data is being protected and diplomacy can be affected across the world securely.
Great, thank you. Okay, we'll go to Michael.
Good afternoon. Thanks everyone for joining. So great to see so many familiar faces. I'm following Mason's leadership here, also speaking in my my own capacity as someone who is quasi with the VA still, but someone who has just recently decided to pursue other adventures, which we'll be announcing here in the near term. But really excited to be here and talk all things about challenges that we've overcome, and I'm really happy to share some of the great successes that we've had here at VA and other stops along the way. So thanks so much for having us, Kirsten.
Great, thanks. Let's go to Don next.
I'm Don Tweedy. I'm the Deputy CIO for Technology and Delivery at the Federal Communications Commission. And underneath me is the Modernization Strategy and Digital Transformation Project. So I do things from IT operations, engineering, solution development, application delivery, and service management.
Great, thank you. Okay, and then Dr. Jackson.
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Caesar Jackson, and I'm with the Air Force. I just started a new project as DODAF Architectural SME, and soon I'll be taking on the capacity to stand up an AI for a project as well. I'm glad to be on the panel with you people.
Thank you. Okay, and then Megan.
Okay.
Hi.
And everyone else, good afternoon.
Hi. Can everyone hear me all right? I think my computer may be frozen.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, fantastic. Hi, everyone. I'm Megan Campos. I'm a Director of Solution Advisory for Public Sector and Regulated Industries at WalkMe, an SAP company, where I work closely with public sector agencies to drive digital transformation.
Great. All right, so we're going to jump into our discussion questions. We'll do our best to get through all of them and give anyone who wants to respond adequate speaking time. That being said, if you really want to jump into the conversation, there is a raise hand icon. If you want to use that just to kind of like signal to me that you want to share, that helps me out as a moderator, but otherwise we'll just call on people. But to start off, we're going to discuss some of the challenges that are being faced in modernizing digital infrastructure. So if I have any volunteers, I want to know about the lessons that have been learned in overcoming these challenges while also maintaining security compliance. Mason, you're off mute. So would you like to kind of jump in and start us off with some of your experiences?
Sure. Happy to. And thanks again for having us on here. We recently hit and when I say we, of course, I'm referring to ATF, even though I am not actively working there, but we recently hit a major milestone by migrating the last of our systems out of our data center into the cloud. So it was a long journey, close to 10 years in all. But when we started out, we were running almost everything we had on really old Spark Solera systems, old operating systems that could no longer be patched and updated, and software that we had lost all users, not users, but all developer knowledge of the source code. So we were starting in a really rough situation, as it's a common story across a lot of government agencies. And we really had a poor history of trying to modernize them. We had gone through a number of efforts, and many of them did not succeed. What really changed it around for us was realizing that one of the reasons so many of our efforts failed was because of how intertwined, how interconnected the systems were. And it wasn't through nice, clean APIs. So many of our systems were directly tied at the data layer, reading and writing from the same database tables. And there were so many dependencies that when we tried to take one system out and update it, modernize it in isolation, we wound up not being able to handle all of those other side effects that ripple out from it. So what helped us in that regard was to completely switch the perspective from trying to modernize system by system to taking it by tier. And we approached the data tier first, and we were also changing the database platform that we were on. And we analyzed every database we had across ATF systems. We converted them all from one of the platforms to another. We went ahead and we knew we wanted to go into the cloud for everything that could, and it turned out everything could. That isn't the case in every instance, but we knew we did not want each system coming up with its own cloud architecture. So right from the beginning, we put in place an architecture for an enterprise cloud environment that we planned to migrate everything into. And the next big piece of our success was we also built a single enterprise continuous integration, continuous deployment environment. We brought in automated infrastructure automation tools, deployment automation tools, test automation tools, and we mandated that everything that went into our cloud environment must be automated and must go through that deployment process. And we containerized we're going to containerize everything that could be containerized. And the main purpose of all of those changes was because another one of the biggest problems that we faced with modernizing was the pace of change. It took so long to get any kind of a deployment through the process, and deployments were so infrequent that there was no way, when we were looking at having to update, in our case, 70-ish systems, largely in parallel, just too many moving parts. No way you can do all of that. So yeah, where was it? So yeah, we went ahead and we had to make it so that we could do frequent deployments and small iterative deployments. So automation was crucial to that. And we'll get into some of the other enablers, but that was a big one. And then I'll quickly wrap up the next of the really big challenges we faced, so we can get it over to other folks, is the official code repositories, your kind of version control system. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say this is true to differing degrees, probably just about everywhere. If you use what's in your version control system as the model of what you're trying to kind of modernize and refactor and build out in your cloud environment, assuming you're not doing wholesale BPR and major changes, it isn't going to be right. We found that the versions that were in there, in some cases, simply weren't the latest versions that had actually been out deployed. There were some faults in the process and things weren't updated. But the biggest problem we found was that our users, and this is not to say the users are the problem, our users are motivated, they care so much about the mission, they're gonna find a way to do what they need to do. And when the IT doesn't support them, when it becomes a roadblock, they're gonna find other ways to do what they need to. Which is good in many ways, but it also leads to what everyone knows as shadow IT. And we found that there was so much capability, SQL scripts, other kinds of things that users ran on their own that weren't in our official version control systems, but had been incorporated into core business processes, that the scope of our modernization effort literally tripled from what we planned on going in as we discovered all of these pieces and having to incorporate those and bring them into the fold. So be very skeptical of the completeness, if not the accuracy of what's in your official version control systems.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing, Mason. It looks like we had a lot of head nods, so I'm sure there's a lot of folks on here who can relate. Dawn, I saw you coming off mute first. Did you want to respond?
Yeah, I'm gonna actually add a little bit. So, Mason mentioned technology debt. And so there's a lot of end of life and end of service software and servers, and even the way applications were developed and coded, like what was applicable 10, 15 years ago is definitely not applicable today. So what I found is by having a digital journey map or a playbook and an updated rationalization of the tech stack help drive us to success with our digital journey. One of the other challenges we had was budget constraints. There's limited funds and we have a lot to do. So that's why there's a huge focus on, optimization and cost efficiency within the government. So having a clear acquisition strategy to help forecast out, services and commodities at the right time is important. So, plan ahead. There's also, we're in the middle of our modernization journey. We're about 92% of the way through with going from a physical data center to cloud. So there's a skills gap aspect also. Having an engineer and even the business adjust from like a physical data center to a cloud-based platform mindset is very challenging. And also that changes how we develop IT to support business services. So train cloud talent, train automation into new capabilities like serverless and no code, low code, and also modern security practices was important to move forward.
Yeah, thank you. Michael, would you like to respond next?
Sure. So I'd say not just at VA, but at lots of places, along the journey, kind of the hardest part isn't always really the technology itself, but it's more the coordination across, say, legal, privacy, IT, and leadership teams to say, hey, this is the tool that we need, and then to get through that piece with contracting. I think it's increasingly challenging. Administration to administration, they have their own kind of curveballs. This one is not unique in that way. And so one of the ways that you get around that is a plus and a minus, and that is you rely heavily on FedRAMP certified companies, which is great because they've gone through the rigmarole of and proven that they have that safety level. It's also hard because it can be unnecessarily limiting, or maybe necessarily limiting, because you have a much smaller pool of applicants that you can pull from and look at. So I liken it to, you go to an auto mall, and instead of being able to choose from a Nissan, a Toyota, a Ford, a Dodge, and a Chevy, you got Dodge, Chevy, and then maybe Tesla or something. You're limited in your scope of what you can apply, and maybe you need an F-150 for the job, but you end up with a Cybertruck instead, or vice versa. So those are kind of the ways that we've been able to work through that, at least at the VA during my tenure.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. I'm going to call for the first poll question because it's applicable to this. And our audience, we want to know from you, what do you consider to be the most challenging aspect of digital transformation at your agency? And if ATARC could just hold that up there on the screen for a little bit until we get most responses, and then for anyone that's curious what the results are, those would be on the screen momentarily. But we're going to move on now to our next question here. With increasing pressure to adopt AI technologies, maybe we can hear from Daniel first on this one. I want to ask, how is your agency developing frameworks to ensure that secure, responsible implementation while also capturing any innovative opportunities?
All right, so actually we've made some pretty good progress on this. We stepped forward really quickly last fall, and we internally we've deployed out a generative AI state chat that allows our users to do things like for example, my boss wrote my performance review in it, and then modified it from there, obviously. But then it also allows us to track EOs. I believe our contracting people are using it to review contracts, and of course, as we move forward, there'll be a lot of AI is being integrated into a lot of the FedRAMP systems that we actually already use. So we have to be careful in the way we implement it, because we have a very good and very robust team of data scientists underneath the chief data officer and the chief AI officer. So her team is doing a great job at making sure that we're moving forward quickly, but we're also making sure that we have the constraints and protecting the data. So, and I even say that my team comes in along and makes sure that the way it's implemented is secure as well.
Amazing. Yeah, thank you for sharing. Caesar, I'd love to hear from you next based on the conversation we've been having so far. What are some of your insights into the question around innovation? You're muted. I can tell he's trying to figure it out. In the meantime, Megan, do you want to jump in and respond to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So AI, it's a very hot topic, right? And so all the conversations that we have, it comes up, right? And so we work with many organizations and agencies that are navigating that AI adoption. But what I've seen succeed the most is really starting with that kind of crawl, walk, run approach, where we really have that discovery to clearly define use cases and ethical guidelines. Because I think ultimately what's most important is that you have these AI initiatives, but you align it with digital adoption strategies so that you can ensure that the users are effectively using the proper AI enhanced tools, that there are guardrails for anything that is not actually secure or centralized, and that the organizations can trust them.
Yeah, thank you, Megan. Dr. Jackson, do we have you back yet?
Yes, I'm back. Sorry about that.
Okay.
It's similar to what the young lady said. Well, with the Air Force, what we did was we took Chat GTP and created something called Nipper GPT for low-level stuff. And then we're in the process of rolling out Super GPT, which is pretty much Nipper ported up to a higher level. But it's pretty much the ethical constraints for us where we can't have certain information still. We're not allowed to put into it because of ethics and things of that nature. Um, but it's growing, and it's the future is here, and then just getting your management to buy in because they're so used to doing things a certain way. And one thing I've learned, I've been in finance and banking, medical and government is slow to adopt. If it's working, they want to just keep the wheels greased and things of that nature. But that's what we're doing right now, and they're actually in the process, as I said, we'll probably be standing up a whole AI division within the next 2 months or so. So that'll be very interesting to be a part of that as well.
Wow, very cool. Okay, any other comments here before we move on? Mason, go ahead.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to be on the AI board that DOJ stood up to look at DOJ AI and issues DOJ wide. And I co-chaired the AI inventory working group. And that was one of the big pieces we did to try to get a handle on AI and start putting together an overall strategy. Was one, put together a strategy and look just strategically overall, how do we think the right way to handle it is, but you also need ground truth, what's out there. It was largely driven by the former EO 14110 and OMB's memo M2410, which are being sort of revamped, but they did provide a framework on how you should test and approach AI in general. And we did an inventory looking at everything, every active and potential use of AI across all DOJ components, and did an assessment for all of them on what are the potential risks to them in terms of safety. But a big focus was also on potential biases in them and potential rights impact. And we also had another team working group that we put together that was focused on testing. So we were going to have a kind of centralized center of excellence for AI testing that has people that know what are the types of biases that could get introduced into AI through the whole training and testing training, all that process. And how do you test for those and try to quantify them to the extent you can? How sensitive is the data that you're going to be incorporating into the system, and how does the system protect it? So looking at the security risks to it, and looking at like the open chat GPTs and a lot of those, you can put your data in just fine. You can run queries and stuff, but you're also helping to train the system, and you run the risk of getting your sensitive stuff now incorporated out and being fed out to others. So how the data is handled on the back end, focus of what you can systems. And then the last part was really updating the routine processes that we have for to help identify new emerging AI use cases between the annual inventories. And for like privacy impact assessments, our ATO processes, procurement processes, we were updating those to put in hooks to identify things that involved AI. So we could then get them, one, tied into the inventory effort, and then start working on some of the prepping and planning for assessing them and testing and things of that sort. And by the way, are you able to see and hear me okay? I got a network issue notice. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thanks for checking. Okay, well, great. Thank you all for sharing those perspectives and your experience there. I'm going to call for the next poll question for our audience. It'll be up here on the screen shortly. And this poll asks, what do you see as the most significant hidden cost of digital inefficiency in your organization? There was also a comment from someone about leaving the poll up a little bit longer. So ATARC behind the scenes, if you could let Carola know that we can help her out there. She missed the first poll. No worries. All right. So the response to that second poll should be up on the screen here shortly. And we are going to now move on to our next question. Who have we not started with yet? Well, anyways, I wanted to ask about how have you seen DApps, the digital adoption platforms, improve operational efficiency while also maintaining, we talked about this earlier, FedRAMP compliance and addressing security concerns. So if I have a brave volunteer to respond to that question, or at least get our conversation started, Mason, go ahead.
I can jump into that one because I probably have the least to say. So I could kind of get mine out of the way. I can't really directly talk to it because we didn't use a DApp at ATF for two main reasons. The first one, a huge part of our modernization effort was paying off the technical debt that had accumulated over decades to decades of not doing the type of IT maintenance we needed to. And again, when you're trying to update 70 systems at the same time, you can't do it right. You can't do full BPR, build out the processes that you want. we really decided we had to rebuild these systems around the existing business processes and minimize user-facing changes because we couldn't handle retraining all the users, making all those changes at the same time. So that was a conscious decision to, as we put it, build like for like, but try to refactor the back-end software architecture to modularize it, rebuild everything around automation technologies. So once we went live with it, we'd be in a position to make really rapid changes and then focus on the user interface, the business processes that really do matter to end users. So that whole phase really didn't involve a lot of user retraining. We are now through that, we're in the cloud, and now the teams really are focusing on rebuilding, revamping the architectures, the business or the user-facing architectures, business processes, things of that sort. And that has been one of the large concerns we've had now is guiding users through the changes because they are going to be significant. Honestly, I see a lot of advantages to it, and that's something I'm going to be kind of reaching back and suggesting they look at a bit because they really haven't, they've dropped a few small incremental updates to users, but a lot of them are they're kind of pushed to production ready, but not turned on and exposed to users yet because large chunks of functionality are going to be changing at the same time. So we haven't hit the point where users have had to go through the major wholesale UI changes. So I see opportunity here. I can't talk a whole lot to experience.
Right. Thank you, Mason. Anyone else want to add anything to that based on experience? Daniel, how about you? What are some of you don't want to? Okay, never mind. Moving on. Michael, go ahead.
I'd just say that, I think in the government space, a lot of the times we've traditionally just, kind of grabbed the book and kind of walk people through it. But technology is changing now. The pace and the speed, it's almost unthinkable how fast we are increasing, and the updates through like super sprints, not even just sprints, but super sprints and new features coming out. It seems like a really good opportunity for developers that you spend all this time and money and investment in improving your product, but then so many of your users don't know how to access it, or they're set in a comfortable work pattern that they don't want to change. So I think dApps have a great potential for enhanced application in the federal space moving forward, actually in all spaces, because you really want to unlock the real power and the real value of that software investment that the agency has made, especially in an era of declining budgets. So I see a real future for them. I don't see a huge amount of adoption in my sphere. Maybe in other spheres there are, but I think there's a huge future for them, in particular for capturing all of the value that the taxpayer has spent on that product to begin with. So I do see a bright future for dApps, but I think right now it's a dawn, not a, we're just starting to see the rays of sunshine for the use cases and the benefits for them. So I see moving forward a huge opportunity in that space.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Okay, anyone else on this before I move on?
Yeah, I'll jump in. So from the dApp side of things, right? So ultimately, dApps like WalkMe are really meant to support just general operational efficiency. So I think oftentimes when users think about pulling in a digital adoption platform, they think, okay, great, this is going to be training and this is going to be onboarding. But you really have to look at it from this more holistic view of how can we use this for that operational efficiency? How can we use this to optimize workflows, right? And optimize the overall business process. I think there's a stat out there that says something like 75% of digital transformations fail, right? And so this is where dApp really can be useful because it is this overlay, at least the way that it works with WalkMe is it's an overlay technology that sits on top of your applications. And yes, it can guide users through it with that hand-holding at the onset if they so need, but it really is meant to be an evergreen solution because outside of just hand-holding, there is also automations that come into play or auto-populating data that we already know, right? So if you think about it for the end user, whether it is a system that they're coming into the first time, or you can even use it in a development case, right? As you are standing up systems, as you are going through UAT and so forth, to actually make sure that what's being built out will work. I just think there's a lot of, I do think there are a lot of areas for opportunity, but I also recognize that DAP is on the newer side of things. But I am always happy to have that conversation because then I find that those who are most resistant to it start seeing the value when you get that kind of visual look into it and almost become our biggest champions at the end of the day.
Great. Thank you, Megan. Okay, we are going to pop up our third poll question, and it says, which area of your operations would benefit most from implementing a digital adoption platform, DAP? So please take a moment to respond. ATARC, if we could just leave it up on the screen a little bit longer. I think people want to have some time to read through it. But that will bring us to our next question here. Let's see. Dawn, if we could begin with you, I wanted to ask, what are some of the broader ripple effects that you have observed when teams face challenges with inefficient or unreliable digital systems? And I'm asking this beyond just the impact on budgets. But yeah, if you could share what you've seen.
Yeah, so one of the areas I've seen is the customer experience and business confidence. So as you're modernizing, you're going to have things that occur and system slowdowns or failures that can directly affect customer facing processes or services. And so that does damage trust and sometimes long-term confidence in the delivery of modernization migrations of digital services. And so the other area I've seen is the innovation and agility gets stifled. The teams get bogged down as they're modernizing and transitioning the full stack to the cloud. They get stifled down with inefficient processes and stuff. And so what I found is they spend more time troubleshooting vice, doing strategic work to modernize. This reduces the ability to really innovate and adapt and respond quickly. Another area that I've seen that's been a ripple effect is employee morale and productivity decline. Sometimes we got a lot of old deprecated technology. We mentioned Spark earlier. There's frustration with unreliable systems that can lead to disengagement. And so, unfortunately, at times, potential turnover, not being the fork.
Thank you. Okay, can we
Yeah,
hear? Go ahead.
Sorry, he made some points that really resonated with me, and I wanted to add on. The morale gets a huge factor, but there's also an add-on kind of consequence of that is that one, people may not bother raising ideas for how things could be improved. If they think IT is essentially like an impediment, it's this thing that's all outdated, it makes their job harder. You're not as likely to reach out to the IT organization to say, here are some ideas on how we could do things more efficiently and changes. So you may be missing out on some opportunities for those kinds of insights. And even at a larger organizational level, when you're looking at potential IT improvement efforts that are funded, the organization may still choose not to pursue some of those advancements or improvements because, let's say, the performance bottlenecks are not the business process improvements, it's the system instability, it's the slowness of the systems. So why bother with putting a lot of effort and money into some of these business process improvements if you're only going to get a small percentage improvement? Whereas when you knock out some of those stability issues, you get the system stable and users are looking at it, it's like, hey, this stuff's actually working for you. Then you can start talking with them about ideas and trying to elicit those types of suggestions and areas for more meaningful improvements. But when the systems go down constantly and are slow, my first week at ATF, I went to one of the field offices full of all kinds of ideas at what cool new stuff I could bring the agency as CTO. But first I wanted to see what was happening and what their lives were like. So I said, just log into the systems and just show me what you do. They logged into one of the ATF systems and sat there for 5 minutes with the spinning wheel of death between just about every keystroke. They said, until you fix that, I don't want to talk about a damn thing. It's like, okay, that is crucial feedback. And So that really kind of helped reset the scope on what we really needed to do.
Yeah. Thank you, Mason. Michael, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, to put that in context in the FOIA landscape, we did 1.5 million FOIA requests last year. VA did 120,000 of those, 8% of the workload. It's very common for, say, a 3 to 5 gigabyte upload of records into a system, right? If those constantly get timed out, you've got 1,000 people across 12 time zones angry, and they're not going to want to do this largely collateral duty work if, when they get to that system, it's not at 3 nines reliability. And so I think the constant theme that you'll hear from this panel of experts who I'm taking notes from and learning so much from, so I'm very grateful for that and for this forum, is that if you don't take care of the people who, and if you forget that there's human beings that have to do and utilize and rely on these systems for their jobs and their careers and putting, steak and salmon on the table, you're kind of missing the mark. And so if these systems are inefficient or unreliable, you really are going to see some dramatic impacts to the departments or agencies that you're representing and working for. They've got to work. It's a real simple, fundamental thing. When you open, when you get in your car and you press the button, it's got to work. If it doesn't, you're not going anywhere. So it's an important thing I think for all of us to keep in mind in the federal space.
Absolutely. Okay, we have time for probably like 1 or 2 more comments on this, if there are any from our panelists. Anyone's welcome to come off mute and jump in.
The only other thing I'd add to what Michael and Mason were saying is that migrating to the cloud is one aspect of it. There's the optimization of those services, right? And so a lot of times when you transition from a traditional data center environment into the cloud, there's a realization that there's a whole new tool set and cloud native capabilities that you can leverage to develop new services and modules in a very rapid fashion. So I think that's something that the business, when they do become frustrated with cloud adoption in the onset, they don't realize that in the latter, it's actually a benefit.
Yeah. And one other thought occurred to me that is, after modernization, it's a totally different spin on some of the kind of perception and side effect issues of stability or underlying issues. After modernization and we went into the cloud, we had about a 10 times decrease in unplanned outages. The systems, like in one of our major portfolios, were much more stable. Some of those legacy systems would literally have 3 to 5 unplanned outages per day because there was nothing we could do to touch them, and they were just crumbling. And that dropped to a few a month. And we've had some months without any, but it's dramatically less. Interestingly, the perception was that the new systems were significantly less stable than the old ones, and that was a major problem, and it was affecting trust in the new systems. And that's where communications with the user communities is crucial, because what we found was when the old systems would go down 3-5 times a day, they would just get an error, and it was normal. They just got used to it. They would just wait a while, they would try again, and it would keep going through. When the system was more stable and you had less frequent outages, the outages they stood out more, and they got more attention all the way up to the executive levels. They were tracking. We had 2 outages this month. What caused them? Why? And there was so much additional focus on the outages, even though they were less frequent, that the perception started that the systems were less stable. So it goes back to all the way through. Screw the technology. Communications with the user community is really what's going to keep you going and keep you alive.
Well said. Megan, did you want to add anything before we move on to the next question?
Yeah, I agree with all those points, right? And I do think that there is room for opportunity with that communication piece with the digital adoption tool, right? So you can use a digital adoption tool to, for example, if there is an outage or if there is an error or you have that spinning circle of death that keeps popping up for everybody, not only can you track that with the digital adoption tool, but then you can also surface an announcement for the end user so that they have that communication when they log in and they know that something's an issue. And then from there, you could have a redirect to somewhere that could give a little bit more information into what's going on. And then further to that, if you wanted to have that continuous user feedback loop, you could essentially embed a survey in there or a open form text field to say, hey, tell us how you're interacting with this, or on a scale of 1 to 10, how frustrated are you with this, right? Because in at least this way, you're gathering a little bit more information, whether it's using those analytics or using that user feedback, so that you can use it to help, fix that underlying system, or at least communicate appropriately with those end users, of course, in the first part of attempting, this modernization effort.
Thank you for that perspective. So moving on to our last question here, Daniel, I'd love to start with you. When it comes to introducing a new digital tool or platform, what has surprised you the most about your team's response or the adaptation to that type of change?
I think the best example for us recently was the introduction of our generative AI capability. That we wanted to get ahead of these users who are a very aggressive, and they see what other organizations, what other countries are using, and they want to make sure that they want that too. So we wanted to make sure that they got the best tools, and we wanted to make sure that they didn't go off and do their own thing, which is very common. I think I found my new favorite word is shadow AI for describing people going off and they want to use AI, but they don't. They want to do it we wanted them to do it the right way, so we're not losing information and risking the information that they're handling. So I was impressed with how quickly we've adapted, and it's become part of our organization. How frequently it's used by pretty much everyone on a regular basis.
Great. Caesar, what about you? Has anything surprised you as far as your team's response or the ability to adapt to a new tool or platform?
Actually, it's been good this go around. On my last project, we had to pull teeth, and I wind up just doing everything on the low level and pushing it up, and kind of ask, as the gentleman before me said, instead of asking for permission, I was just asking for forgiveness, so to speak. So, but it's getting it's a lot better now, and I can see that my agency is going in the right direction.
Okay.
So I'm looking forward to the process.
Okay, great. Thank you. Anyone else on the panel want to share an experience they may have had with the adoption of a tool? Mason, go ahead.
I was a little bit surprised in a positive way. I was really concerned when we started that transition, exactly as the word, actually looking at business process reengineering, user interface rebuilding, just kind of reinventing how these systems work to make them more efficient and better for the users. And these are users that had been wanting for years and years and years new things. So they were desperately wanting change. But even still, human nature is in a lot of the design discussions. The discussions went back to how the legacy systems did it as a guide for how things. So there was a constant need to sort of remind them, hey, yes, that's how it did, but how do you want it to be done? So I was really concerned just with that and some of the previous experiences I'd seen, there would be a lot of resistance to users once the new capabilities started rolling out. And of the modules that have gone out so far, I thought there were along testing and just initial feedback, there was some confusion around what changes or things that were different were defects that weren't right just because they weren't done the way they were intended to and there were bugs, versus which ones were intentional changes that were just different from what they were used to. So there was a bit of a challenge kind of navigating through that. But for the most part, once they actually saw and had the new stuff in front of them, and they were able to have some of their subject matter experts guide them through the changes and why and how, the feedback that we were seeing was fantastic. They really jumped on board and they seemed to be excited about the new stuff and the changes. So I spent a lot of time worrying about stuff. And in this case, at least, it wound up a lot better than we'd expected. And I do credit a fair amount of that to the really engaged product owners that we had among the user community that were essentially our advocates. They were the ones that had worked with the development team all the way throughout on a daily basis. They knew all of the systems, the changes, and then they were the advocates back to the user community as users themselves. Here's what, here's why, and they were the primary source for answers. And I think that probably helped quite a bit. But yeah, I've seen some real horror stories other places and other efforts in the past. It was a wonderful surprise that was not the case here.
Thank you for sharing, Mason. And Michael, did you want to respond as well?
Just a common, occurrence as well. The hidden champions, I think Mason's talking about too, the people that you maybe the last person you would expect to be fully on board and be supportive of this. It's shockingly good. You end up running into people that are like, wow, that's really great. They finally felt heard, that someone took into account their needs, their operational needs, and that this solution, because you were careful with it, because you went through the process and you worked through the appropriate channels to get the right tool for the right task, then they're so appreciative and so committed to working with that tool. So really the hidden champions that you uncover was the most surprising thing. People sometimes have reputations for being Luddites or tech evangelists, right? And then never the twain shall meet. But it's shocking, and in many ways, in a great way, how many people are so energized, empowered, and excited about new tools that they become champions, and they really help that flywheel of success spin and increase adoption agency-wide.
Yeah. And small frequent deployments that I'd mentioned earlier, there's this mindset that we had built up over history that changes when something goes out, if a feature isn't in it, they're never going to see it because stuff doesn't change. And throughout this course, as we were rebuilding things around these automated deployments, we were telling them we want to go live with a bare minimum of functionality and then add to it over time. And there was deserved skepticism. But once we went live, we really put a huge focus on those small frequent changes. And in fact, for the first big portfolio that we did migrate to the cloud, for the entire year after we went live with it, we averaged a production deployment on 91% of all workdays that year. And on average, 8 stories or 8 changes were deployed per day. So the users were putting in these user stories or had this backlog of stuff that we hadn't gotten in the primary release, but they saw steady, frequent change, and they were like, "Oh my God, we've never seen it before." That built so much trust and goodwill to help buy patience for the stuff we hadn't gotten to yet. That was huge.
Yeah, and I'll piggyback on that. It's the value of these micro wins, if you will, right? It's just doing something small, a small improvement, whether it's, automating something that's a multi-click task, or I recently had an A&D client who on one workflow, there was I think it was like a 200-page or so job aid that they had to get through the process. We did a head-to-head where half the people used that job aid, the other half the people used a digital adoption tool like WalkMe. And it turned out that those that had to use the job aid spent 2.5 hours going through this process. The people using WalkMe, it only took them 37 minutes. So, and that's just one process, right? So it's making those simple yet impactful changes and then scaling out. But yes, that trust that you gain just from making those minor changes, it is surprising, but like I said, very impactful.
Oh, thank you. Okay, well, we are coming towards the end of our panel discussion, so we're going to do a round of key takeaways. I don't remember if I called for the third poll question or not. So if I haven't, then ATARC, if you could put that up on the screen now. There has been a little bit of chatter about people missing the poll question. All right, this is our 4th and final poll question. So if you would like to receive your CPE credit, please respond yes or no. And for the folks that are worried about not maybe responding to a poll. I don't know the best way to go about this. Either Kim or David, maybe you can drop an email in the chat for everyone to see. And then if they're concerned about not receiving their CPE credit, they can email you directly. I think that'd probably be the best way to move forward with that. So all that being said, I want to hear from each of our panelists as we wrap up this discussion here. What is one key takeaway that you've had from this hour that we've been together that you think is the most important thing that you're taking away from this conversation that you really hope lands with our audience as well? And we'll go around. I want to hear from each of you. You have about a minute or two. Okay, let's begin with Dawn, if you don't mind.
I don't mind. Some of the key takeaways that I pulled out from today is business engagement and alignment, understanding the business requirements and needs to successfully modernize or transition from a typical data center environment to the cloud. Another thing that I took away today was the integration between the business processes and leveraging new tools and capabilities like AI and other cloud native capabilities. Those are two of the takeaways. I'll probably have some more after someone else chimes in.
No, that was perfect. Thank you for
Okay.
off here. Daniel, we'll go to you next. What was your biggest takeaway from the discussion?
I think from my experience and from what I've seen from this discussion is that you have a lot of change is good, but you have to manage that change because change isn't just about the technology. It's really about the people and the processes that they use. Because if you're not helping them out, you're going to create frustration and actually makes things worse. So you want to make sure that you're allocating as much effort as possible to make their lives better.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Dr. Jackson, what is your key takeaway from the conversation? You're mute.
I got it now. Sorry. I guess the key takeaway is that in government, change used to happen slow, but now change is happening daily. It's just, I mean, the change is here, and they're trying to integrate these technologies in. I work for DHS. I worked on that project that Mr. McDaniel is working on like 10 years ago, when they first started, when they were starting to just try to break down the data center and go to the cloud. And it was supposed to be a 5-year project back then. It's already been 10 years. I'm like, wow, things of that nature. But now everything has just happened instantaneous. So you just need your management to buy in.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Okay, Michael, let's hear from you next.
I think the biggest stakeholder and the commonality, I think, if you had to draw one theme out from everyone's contributions, which are awesome today, is that we serve the stakeholders. We serve the people that are doing the jobs every single day. And it's incumbent upon us to get it right. Like, we have to make sure that what we do and what we implement serves their needs first. And I think that was kind of the theme that I took away from everyone's presentations, along with a rack of notes as well. So thank you to all the panelists for providing me with some inspiration today in my own practice as I look to transition and move on. But really grateful for the opportunity to be here and for the great insights of everyone on this panel today. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, Mason, what's yours?
I'm going to cheat and give a couple of them really quickly. One is already been mentioned, just partner with the user communities. It's the communication with them that's going to make or break you, both on the input into the requirement side from really engaged product owners to just communicating with the user communities to help them through the change. And say, well, I haven't used DAP. That looks really promising as a way of helping with that. When modernizing, automate everything and set really aggressive targets for small frequent deployments, even if you think they aren't realistic. Really push the teams to approach their processes and developments with that thought of get out as many small changes as quickly as you can. That'll try to help guide the culture. And then tied around that changing of the culture and enabling that, you really need to update your governance processes. Because if it takes you a month to get something through your change control board, doesn't matter if you can build a VM or a container in a couple of minutes. So one really quick example of what we've found really helpful in that regard is for changing culture is request for change through a standard government process. Often you have to have something that goes through, and any change to production, you have to ask for approval, and it can be a long process. we added in something called a process approval for a request for change, where if a team wrote a deployment automation plan on how they're using the CI/CD environment, how they're using automated testing, infrastructure automation, things of that sort, and bring that in a request for change to our change advisory board, then we would review that process. And if it looked mature enough, we would approve that process and then give them the express pass. They could deploy as many times as they want, as rapidly as they want, as long as they follow that process. Anyone that hasn't kind of reached that level of maturity has to come ask the board for permission for every deployment. So it's kind of a carrot and stick. We had teams that didn't have a deployment automation plan approved, seeing these other teams blowing by them with all these rapid changes. They started coming to the board saying, how can we get on board that? How can we get engaged in this CI/CD process? But governance processes along with the technologies.
All right. Thank you, Mason. And Megan, we will end with you.
Yeah. So kind of echoing what a lot of folks have said here today, right? It's about the human at the end of the day, empowering public servants and building trust with citizens and whoever's interacting with that technology, right? Because it really is more than just upgrading systems, right, at the end of the day. And then I also think hearing all the different experiences that people are having, with modernization initiatives or getting there as well. It's really truly having to understand everyone's unique challenges as well, and making sure that, at least from our side of the house, really listening to that and making sure that we can hone in and solution truly according to each of your agency's needs.
Thank you. Yeah, this has been such a pleasure. I want to thank all of our panelists for their time today. I've learned a lot. I'm sure our audience has too. And I also want to thank our audience for joining us and sending in your comments. And I cannot forget to thank our partners at WalkMe, because they are what helped make today's event possible. So if y'all enjoyed this event, you'll probably enjoy our next one. We have these webinars every Thursday. Our next one is up on this screen here now. You can just go register online, and we hope to see you there at the next one. I hope everyone has a great rest of your week, and talk soon.